Hey, what's up, everybody? Jeremy here, and guys, I'm very excited for the guests we have today because when it comes to investing in real estate, frankly, it's one of the best things you can ever do, but it's also one of the most confusing, and so many things you need to know about it. So we have a guest with us today that's really going to help us. His name is CJ Calio, and CJ, thanks for hanging out with me today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeremy.
So I'm curious because I know everybody kind of has a different way this happens for them, but how did you get into the real estate world, man?
Yeah, that takes me back almost 10 years. So prior to being in real estate, my profession was a UPS driver. So I was that guy delivering all your Amazon packages when Amazon was still coming up with their delivery system. But like most of you know, with this being the new year, Christmas just ended. And for us, that's our busy season. That's the time where we're spending the most effort delivering your packages, trying to get it there before Christmas, which means I'm away from family and it's not always fun.
Sure.
So up until this point, I was excited. I loved the job. But this one particular Christmas, we got murdered. It was bad. And I found myself spending so much time on road where I was working till like 1 a.m. And I wasn't seeing my family and my kids. And this is the time of year where you're supposed to enjoy and share time with loved ones. And it frustrated me. And it's funny how things work where when you get some pain, you start to think, man, something's got to change. And for me, that question became, how can I just leave this profession? I mean, this is something I thought I was going to retire from. So I brought it up to my wife. And my wife, she was in full support of it. She goes, yeah, let's get you out of the job. Now, my question to you is, how are you going to replace your income?
Well, and I think one of the hard things about that too, so like my mother-in-law is a chiropractor, and some of her best patients are UPS drivers because, man, your bodies get beat up from being in that truck all day. So at the same time, like, it's a lot of work, it's long hours, but it takes a toll on your body too. So that's something you got to consider.
Absolutely.
So anyway, you were saying, sorry, your wife gave you kind of a question about it, and then I cut you off.
Yeah, you're good. The question was, how are you going to replace it? And I never thought that far because, you know, you're in that emotional state. You're not really thinking clearly. I just knew I wanted out. I wanted to get into a space where I could spend more time with those who I loved. And when she pressed that question, the first thing that came to mind wasn't real estate. That was her interest. Mine was, well, what can I do to create streams of income? Right? So I ventured off on trying network marketing, startup businesses. And the funny thing is I probably went through 8 or 9 of them and they all failed within the year. And my wife was still very, very interested and heavily encouraging me to step into real estate. See, the thing is, I knew nothing about it. I had no experience in real estate. I had no technical background. I don't understand trades. So for me, it's like, this is a foreign thing. It was very intimidating. Fear crept up a lot. And she encouraged me. And with my failed businesses, I was like, you know what? What harm will it do to just give it a shot to support her? So we took our dive in buying our first real estate property out of state, 3,000 miles away. And we set it for 12 months just to make sure this thing actually works.
So then from there, like, when did you know, like, you know, this was going to work for you? When did you know this was kind of a successful thing?
After the year and seeing the residual, because our strategy is all about cash flow. So we buy and hold property to create those streams of incomes so I could eventually replace my UPS income. And that year, it was pretty consistent. It was like, oh, okay, this strategy actually works. And it excited us to go and buy more. So in the following year, we picked up 4 or 5 more properties because we realized this concept can get me to my goal of financial independence. And then the big thing happened. We became unmortgageable.
What does that mean?
That changed everything. That being unmortgageable means the banks will no longer lend to you. Because
what did you do, man? like how did you create that problem?
The creation of the problem was, one, I spent all our money putting down payments and leveraging it to a T, which is one of the strategies that is taught in like Rich Dad Poor Dad to leverage the banks, good debt. And we got to that point and we're like, oh, shoot, we don't qualify. How are we going to get to our financial freedom goal? Because we weren't even close. I mean, 7 doors is good income, but you know, simple math, $100 per door, that's not going to replace the UPS income. What do we do now? And to me, that fork was the biggest opportunity for us to create something and follow it through that we didn't know was an opportunity.
So how did you handle that then? That's wild, because it's like, if you can't get financing, like you can't buy more, like you can't expand. Like, so how did you handle that?
Yeah, the creativity got to flow through us because, the circumstance was we can't change this. Lenders won't lend to us. But it didn't mean we had to stop. So we started to adjust our perspective around what opportunity looks like and how we can create a solution to a problem. Because real estate investing pretty much is you're creating a solution to a problem. The problem is X, Y, or Z, and you come in as the investor with a solution, and most people are like, oh yeah, let's make the deal work. So for us, we got to find ways to leverage other people's money. And that helped us to shoot up like a rocket in the next 3 years.
So let me ask you this thing, because I'm sure people are listening to this are saying like, I'm in a job, I'm in a career, I don't have a ton of, you look at the economy now, man, and it's like most people don't even have a savings account with more than $500 in it. So it's like they hear that, real estate's definitely the way to go, but how do you do that then as a regular person, somebody listening to this?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot at networking events, and my go-to response is this: you either have time or money. Very few people have both. So if you don't have money but you have time, what are you focusing in on that can get you closer to your goal? And that's where creativity allowed me to play, because the funny thing is I got hurt when this happened. So not only did we get denied by mortgages because of our debt to income, I also lost my income for almost 2.5 years because of a work injury. Back to your statement, UPS body tear down.
People don't consider that at all, man. Your backs, your knees, like it's wild.
Yeah, and it was the biggest blessing in my life because it freed up all this time. Mm-hmm. So I got to research and gather information that produced some confidence in strategies, and then I got to implement it. So when you have the time, when you do your research and you find a strategy you want to dive in, see it through. We believe in focus as an acronym. Follow one course until successful. And that's what we did. I adopted the BRRRR strategy, which is off bigger pockets. And the BRRRR stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. And the concept behind this is you can take a very limited amount of capital and rinse and repeat it when done properly. But like anything,
how much capital are we talking on that? Like 10,000, 100,000, 200,000? Like what are we looking at?
So it goes back to how I created opportunity with other people, right?
Yeah.
100,000 is kind of the standard I like to run with. Yeah. And being from Hawaii, $100,000 is equity sitting in most properties that I got to create opportunities around, educating people how they can tap into it and partner with me to create solutions to my financial problem.
Interesting. So basically you're getting people to invest in the property you want to flip. Is that what's happening?
They're becoming my bank to acquire these distressed, dilapidated properties that I can fix up and then refinance out with maybe a commercial loan product, which doesn't take into consideration my debt to income, or a portfolio loan of some sort, and work things that way. And it's a beautiful strategy because if I have $100,000 lender, I'm using somebody else's money to acquire this asset. And then when I refinance it out with a non-traditional loan product, like a commercial loan or a portfolio loan, I get to pay them back plus their interest, but they were going to want to re-execute again because they made some money. So it's a beautiful relationship and evolution that goes through this process of the BRRRR strategy.
So let me ask you this then, like when you rehab that property, is the goal to then sell it, or is it the goal to then make it something where people are paying rent so it's cash flowing, or what's kind of the thought process from there?
Yeah, that's a good question, because the first assumption most people make about our strategy is we're going to sell it and make that money because, flipping is the sexy thing to do. Yeah. For us, the benefit and the appreciation isn't to sell, but it's to leave in the equity required on the refinance side. We want to keep it because our strategy is purely about streams of income to replace whatever you're trying to replace. And in my situation was my paycheck.
Yeah. CJ, see, I want to ask you one thing too, because once again, like I'm a newbie at any of this stuff, man. So I apologize if any of my questions are like, how could you not know that? But like you mentioned equity there, so I'm curious, like, were you able to then use the equity for like, maybe a home equity line of credit or something, so you're able to do your next property, or was that not something you were considering?
It is an option. It is definitely an option. And it really depends on the investor. So for us in particular, becoming that expert in the BRRRR, I got really good in, and the funny thing is the definition between, or the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is the amount of practice and repetitions you put in. So the amount of reps I got in doing the BRRRR strategy allowed me to leave in no money consistently. And that equity for me was my reward for all the work I did, right? I can tap into it if I feel like I need to it. And I also got really good with creating opportunities with other people and their capital. Being that, like I said, time and money. A lot of people that have money don't have the time. So how can I create a solution for them to make a return while I stay focused and active in what I'm great at?
So let me ask you this, because I imagine those first properties are probably, single door, single family, whatever it may be. Are you then kind of stair stepping up to higher level things like, hey, like we're at 30 units, 40 units. I know a lot of the, the Cardones and people of the world talk about things that are like 500 units. Like, is that kind of the concept of where you're going with things?
Absolutely.
Or do you like to stay with the smaller units?
I think there's a natural progression. And for us in particular, 90 doors was the threshold where my wife's the back office bookkeeper. So she got to handle all the stabilizations while I was accumulating. And that's why we're a very good team, I believe. But for her, that was her limit, because 90 doors is 90 tenants, it's 90 leases, it's 90 rents. It's a lot to take in and to manage on a consistent basis. So I like to reference Monopoly. The goal is to buy property, then add green houses, right? But eventually you can only add so many green doors.
We were playing Monopoly last night and we got our butts kicked by my 4-year-old. But anyway, continue. That's why I'm dying laughing.
Got promise.
I'm like, he had to say Monopoly. We were literally just playing Monopoly last night. Continue. Sorry.
You're good, and your 4-year-old may be onto something. So after you acquire so many green houses, you can't add more than 4. You get to trade it in for a red hotel, and that's the philosophy we like to preach in our community. Is your goal is to accumulate enough to then trade into the red hotel, and that's what we're doing personally. We're actually repositioning our portfolio and offloading some singles to get into the commercial space.
So in terms of that then, because you're talking about 90 doors and your wife kind of running the whole thing, your poor wife, that's a lot of doors. So I guess, do you systemize and then create property managers then, or management groups, or like where does that go from there?
Yeah, we embody the who not how philosophy. We are not experts in property management by no means. We have no intention of managing ourselves. We want to find the expert in that field and partner with them. So yes, we have those processes and systems in place. We have the network capability to handle the volume that we move, and if not more. And it's funny how relationships work in professions where the more you do something, the more people become loyal to you because they see you as a consistent revenue or a partnership that's long-term. Longevity is key in this business. So establishing those relationships with those team members were very crucial and vital for our success to be at where we're at today and now scaling to the next level.
So I guess we're kind of backstepping a little bit, but when you're taking a look at like, what is the right property for me? Like, how do you take a look at that? And I guess, how does that compare to where you are, I guess, in your journey as well? Because, being a real estate investor itself is a journey.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeremy. And what we like to point people back to is your why. Why are you investing in real estate? There's so many ways to make money in real estate, and cash flow is just a sliver of it. And from cash flow, you can even dice it up into even more unique strategies. And from that point, the property kind of designs itself for you. So for us, we're into long-term rentals because our strategy is streams of income to have that consistency as if it was a paycheck over a long period of time. Another example might be short-term. It's a little bit more volatile, but could make a lot more money, right? And then there's variations of syndication and multifamily. You can go into so many slivers. You get to really identify what works best for you once you isolate your why.
So in terms of that then, I guess, what is one of the biggest challenges you faced as an investor? Like, what did you find were, I guess one of those spots you're in, you're like, you mentioned the unmortgageable situation, but I'm sure there were other situations that you're like, how do I build myself a better parachute out of this as I'm falling out of the airplane?
Yeah, it's funny you asked me that question because my wife was just asking me that question before we got on. Now, I didn't really isolate any particular incident, more so to the mindset. My definition of failure changed as I grew. And I think that was very crucial for me because despite what happens externally, it's all what happens internally on how I respond to it. And I've heard before somebody say, when your emotions go up, your intelligence goes down. And I got to practice that a lot through all the different little failures I've gone through throughout my growth process to where we're at today.
You know, it's interesting. We were talking about this yesterday. Have you heard the phrase like playing on tilt when it refers to a poker player?
No,
Like,
I'm not familiar with
okay,
that.
so the idea is you get in a situation where you're really emotional and you're trying to beat the person next to you so bad you make bad decisions. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Like you have to figure out how to take yourself out of that situation to make a better decision.
Exactly. It is.
So how do you do that for yourself then? Like how do you get yourself out of that mindset? Because at the same time, like, you know, man, like I'll get upset about something, and one of the things I do is I write the email and then I put it in a draft so I can think about it. Like for you, how do you handle the emotion of the situation to get out of making the bad decision?
Yeah, I like to follow Robert Kiyosaki, and I hear him say this often, is asking better questions. So I ask myself a different question. Instead of, why is this happening to me? What is it trying to teach me? I rephrase it, and it allows me to come from a curiosity learning standing versus, oh, this is it, and it's the end of it. I'm done. It's never a dead end to me. It's a matter of how many times am I willing to learn something before I guess perfect it in a sense. And I only can think of Thomas Edison. You know, he did 10,000 ways the light bulb didn't work until the one way it did. And if he can go through 10,000 perceivable failures, why am I frustrated around the first? Anything new, you get the opportunity to learn because you don't know what you don't know.
I think that approach is so important. And I talk about adversity a lot, right? Like, and people, I think people look at adversity in two different ways. One looks at it and says, oh my God, I'm going that way. The other person says, okay, that looks kind of scary, but you know, what am I going to learn from this and how am I going to come out the other side better? And I think so much of life is viewpoints. And I think that viewpoint is so important.
Yeah. Perspective is everything, man.
So for you then, I think one of the important things is also having the right people around you to support you. How do you surround yourself with the right people and the right like-minded people so that, like, you know, you're actually getting that support you need?
Yeah. How I'd like to answer that question is you are who you surround yourself with. So I ask myself two questions. Do they have what I want, and are they doing what I want to do? And I look to infuse myself into that type of community. Because the byproduct of surrounding yourself with successful people is you're going to find some level of success. It's contagious.
Well, CJ, this has been awesome, man. For people listening, if they want to connect with you, if they want to find out more about what you're doing, where's going to be the best place for our listeners to go?
Yeah, if you're on social media, Instagram, our handle is at WN Properties. And if you want to just gather a free gift and learn a little bit more about what we do and what we have to offer, check us out at whynotnowinrealestate.com.
Very cool. Well, CJ, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, man.
I appreciate it, Jeremy. Thank you.